Hey, fellow gun enthusiasts, let's dive right into the nitty-gritty of ammo prices this year, because if you're like me, eyeing those stocked shelves and scratching your head over why your wallet's taking a hit despite the deals, you're not alone. We've seen some shifts from January to now in July 2025, and yeah, prices have ticked up across the board for those staple calibers we all rely on. I'm talking real numbers here, based on what I've tracked through price indices, shop checks, and market intel, all boiling down to those nagging tariffs and a mix of other economic curveballs jacking things up. Oh, and before we dig deeper, smash that like button and subscribe to Survival Gear Showcase for more no-nonsense breakdowns on gear that'll keep you sharp, whether it's plinking at the range or prepping for whatever comes next. Ammunition price analysis for mentioned calibers, January to July 2025. Look, ammo prices aren't crashing like they were hinting at earlier this year. Instead, they've been creeping up, and it's hitting our favorites hard. Based on trackers like Black Basin's index and spot checks from retailers, the overall market dipped low in Q1 but started climbing after April's tariff announcements. We're talking a 10% blanket on imports, plus higher hits on key materials like lead from Canada, 25%, and China, 10%, which jacks up costs for imported rounds and components. Add in a lingering global propellant shortage and rising raw material prices, copper, brass, you name it, and it's no wonder we're paying more. Manufacturers aren't eating those costs. They're passing them on, and us shooters are feeling the squeeze. But hey, it's not all doom. Smart stockpiling and reloading can still keep you shooting without breaking the bank. I'll break it down caliber by caliber with specific jumps from January averages to current July figures and why it's happening. I've thrown in some personal takes from my own range days to keep it real. 9mm Luger. Man, 9mm Luger is the workhorse for so many of us. Whether you're running drills with your Glock 19 or keeping that compact carry fed for self-defense. Back in January, we were seeing averages around 20 cents to 25 cents per round for bulk FMJ, like those Blazer brass boxes that used to fly off the shelves at 20 cents a pop. It felt like a steal after the 2021 craziness, right? But fast forward to July, and that same stuff is hovering at 22 cents to 30 cents per round, sometimes pushing 26 cents on average for decent training loads. I've noticed it firsthand at my local shop. A case of 1,000 rounds that cost me $200 in winter is now closer to $240, and that's without shipping. Why the bump? Blame the tariffs first. They're slapping extra costs on imported 9mm Luger, which makes up a chunk of the affordable stuff from Europe and Asia. Places like Turkey and Brazil supply a ton of budget 9mm Luger, and that 10% import tax adds up quick, especially when combined with higher shipping fees from global trade tensions. Then there's the raw materials. Copper prices are up 12% this year due to mining disruptions, and brass casings aren't immune. Remember that propellant shortage we've been dealing with since 2023? It's still biting, forcing manufacturers like Federal and Winchester to pay more for powder, and they pass it on. On the flip side, domestic production ramped up post-2020, but with demand cooling from economic pinches, inflation at 3 to 4%, factories are adjusting by trimming output on fringe loads and focusing on staples, which means less competition to keep prices down. 22 LR rimfire. 22 LR rimfire, the plinker's best friend and the caliber that got most of us hooked on shooting as kids. It's cheap, low recoil, and perfect for teaching newbies or just blasting cans in the backyard with a Ruger 1022. In January, prices were sitting pretty at about 5 cents to 6 cents per round for bulk bricks. Think 500 rounds for $25, no limits, no drama. That was a relief after years of scarcity. But by July, we're seeing 5 cents to 7 cents, with averages creeping to 6 cents. I grabbed a brick last week at my go-to spot, and it was $30 instead of $25. Small change, but it adds up when you're running high-volume drills. The reasons? Tariffs aren't hitting 22 LR rimfire as hard since a lot is domestic, but imported options from places like Mexico or Europe. Hello, CCI's overseas lines are feeling the 10% bite, which ripples through the market. Raw lead costs are up big time. That 25% tariff on Canadian imports, which supply a quarter of our lead, means primers and bullets cost more to make. Plus, that ongoing propellant crunch is universal. Even rimfire needs powder, and shortages have driven base costs up 15% globally. Market-wise, demand dipped mid-year as folks tightened belts on non-essentials. Credit card debt hit $1 trillion, remember? But manufacturers like Remington scaled back production to avoid overstock, which props prices up. Overall, it's still the most affordable caliber out there, but watch for further bumps if energy costs keep rising. And with tariffs potentially escalating trade wars, we could see another bump by year's end if domestic suppliers can't ramp up fast enough. 223 Remington Rifle. Now we're talking rifle territory. 223 Remington Rifle is the king for AR-15 fans, whether you're zeroing optics on a budget build or prepping for 3-gun comps. January had it under 30 per round for brass FMJ, averaging around 28 cents for bulk. Decent for training without guilt. But come July, it's edged to 40 to 50 cents, with spots hitting 45 cents average. Ouch. I felt it when restocking for a carbine course. What was $280 for 1,000 rounds is now pushing $450. Culprits? Tariffs are front and center here. 223 Remington often uses imported steel cases from Russia or Eastern Europe, but with bans and now extra duties, costs soar. The 10% blanket hits brass too, and lead tariffs inflate bullet prices. Raw materials are killers. Steel up 20% globally, and the propellant shortage has ammo makers like Lake City prioritizing military contracts, leaving civies with less supply and higher tags. Demand steady for AR platforms, but economic strain, disposable income down 0.7% in April means fewer impulse buys, so producers hike prices to maintain margins. 308 Winchester. All right, picking up where we left off. Let's talk 308 Winchester, the go-to for precision shooters and hunters alike. In January 2025, prices were hanging around 50 cents to 70 cents per round for solid brass FMJ or hunting loads. Think Federal or Winchester at the lower end, making it feasible for stocking up without too much pain. But by July, we're seeing it climb to 60 cents to 75 cents, with averages around 67 cents for training ammo. I remember grabbing a box of 20 for $10 back in winter. Now it's closer to $13.50 at the same shop. And that's for basic stuff, not the match-grade Sierra loads I prefer for elk season. 7.62 by 39 millimeters. Now, on to 7.62 by 39 millimeter, the rugged caliber that powers AK and SKSs, perfect for hog hunting or just blasting at the range with that satisfying recoil. January 2025 was a sweet spot, with prices at an all-time low around 45 cents per round for steel-cased stuff, like those sealed tins from Tula or Wolf that stack deep in the safe. It was a buyer's market, no doubt. But July is telling a different story, up to 60 cents to 70 cents per round, averaging 65 cents for FMJ. I felt the pinch restocking my AK-47. What was $450 for a 1,000-round case is now $650, and that's if you can find it without back orders. Why so steep? Tariffs hit this caliber hard. Much of 7.62 by 39 millimeter comes from Eastern Europe and Asia, with bans on Russian imports already in place, and now extras like 36% on Bosnia, Igman, or 37% on Serbia, Pervi Partizan. That drives costs sky high, especially for steel-cased budget options. Steel tariffs at 25% inflate casings, and the propellant crunch adds another layer. Global shortages mean paying premiums for powder. Demand's rising with AK popularity in the States, but economic squeezes, trillion-dollar credit debt, cool bulk buys, letting suppliers hike to match. 12-gauge shotgun. Let's not forget the boomstick classics. 12-gauge shotgun shells are the backbone for bird hunters, clay busters, and home defenders. In January, bird shot loads, think 7.5 or 8, 2 3/4 inch 1/1 ounce. We're averaging 30 cents to 35 cents per shell for bulk boxes, with 250-round cases around $75 to $85. Perfect for high-volume trap days without breaking the bank. Buckshot, 0 or number 4, was 50 cents to 70 cents, and slugs hovered at $1 to $1.20. But by July, bird shots up to 35 cents to 45 cents, cases hitting $85 to $100, buckshots 60 cents to 85 cents, and slugs $1.20 to $1.50. That's a 20 to 25% jump overall. Birdshot from 32 cents average to 40 cents, increase 25%. Buckshot from 60 cents to 75 cents, increase 25%. Slugs from $1.10 to $1.35, increase 23%. I stocked up early for dove season with my Remington 870, but now a 25-round box of Federal Top Gun No. 8 that was $8 is closer to $10 at the counter. Why the rise? Tariffs are crushing it here, since lead shot is the heart of most shells, and we're importing tons from Canada, 25% tariff, and China, 10%. Lead costs have spiked historically, up 400% in some contexts, but in 2025, those duties add 20 to 25% to production, especially for birdshot and buckshot. Comparison of price increases across calibers. To put it all in perspective, here's a quick rundown of how these calibers stack up in terms of price jumps from January to July 2025. I've calculated based on low-end and mid-range averages for a fair view. 9mm Luger saw a solid 15% increase overall, 20% from the low end, 20 cents to 24 cents, or 15.5% mid-range, 22.5 cents to 26 cents. 22 LR rimfire jumped 20% from the baseline 5 cents, or about 9% averaged, 5.5 cents to 6 cents. 223 Remington rifle hit a whopping 60% from the January low, 28 cents to 45 cents, or 43% on the high end, 35 cents to 50 cents. 308 Winchester shook out to about 25% from baseline, 50 cents to 62.5 cents, or 15% averaged, 60 cents to 69 cents. 12-gauge shotgun birdshot climbed 25%, 32 cents to 40 cents. Buckshot 25%, 60 cents to 75 cents. Slugs 23%, $1.10 to $1.35. Finally, 7.62 by 39mm took a 44% hit from 45 cents to 65 cents, or 27% mid-range, 50 cents to 63.5 cents. These shifts highlight how import-heavy calibers like 7.62 by 39mm and 223 Remington got hammered hardest by tariffs, while lead-dependent 12-gauge felt the material squeeze, with more domestic ones like 22 LR rimfire seeing milder creeps. Overall, market trends and why prices are climbing hue. We've covered the calibers, but let's zoom out on the big picture for 2025. From January's lows driven by post-2024 glut and steady supply to July's upticks, the ammo world's feeling the heat from those April tariffs. The 10% baseline on all imports plus reciprocals up to 37% on key suppliers is the main culprit, adding $50 to $100 per 1,000 rounds on staples like 9mm Luger or 223 Remington. It's not instant. Pre-tariff inventory buffered May prices, but as stocks dwindle, hikes roll in gradually, 3 to 8% per quarter per analysts. Raw materials amplify it. Steel, aluminum at 25%. Lead from Canada, China up 10 to 25%. Copper, 12% globally. propellant shortages since 2023 persist, forcing cuts in fringe calibers and focus on staples, reducing competition. Economic strain plays in. Consumer spending dipped in May. Disposable income down 0.7%. Credit card debt hit $1 trillion, making shooters picky, cutting non-essentials like range days. Geopolitical stuff, Ukraine, Middle East, hasn't spiked panic buys yet, but could tighten imports further. Domestic makers like Federal or Winchester are ramping, but margins were thin from 2023 to 2024 price wars, so they're raising to compensate. I've seen it. Shelves full but pricier, pushing me to reload benches and dry fire tools. Reloading markets booming, $4.5 billion in 2023 to $8 billion soon for that control. Strategies to beat the price. Hikes, reloading, smart buying, and training smarter. Okay, we've dissected the calibers and reasons for these price spikes. Tariffs, rising materials, and economic pressures. But let's get real. As shooters, we're not letting that sideline us from the range or our preps. I've weathered ammo shortages since my first AR build, and the key is adapting smartly without cutting corners on skills. Reloading is exploding in popularity for good reason. It's a money saver and lets you customize loads for optimal performance. The reloading market's surging from $4.5 billion in 2023 toward $8 billion. Fueled by tariff hits making factory ammo pricier. Components like powder and primers cost more, but bulk buys at gun shows help. Buddies of mine reload 7.62 by 39mm for AKs, reusing cases to skip hikes. Just watch primer shortages. Newbies start with user-friendly Hornady or RCBS kits and YouTube guides. Combine with dry fire tools like laser trainers or Mantis X on your Glock to hone draws without ammo. For 22 LR rimfires volume drills, add airsoft for cheap recoil sims. Future outlook. Will prices keep climbing? And what can we do? Looking ahead to the rest of 2025 and beyond, these increases might not let up soon. Tariffs are sticky, with the 10% blanket and higher on specifics like 25% on steel, aluminum, or lead. If trade talks with China or Europe stall, expect another 10 to 20% across the board by year-end, especially for import-heavy calibers like 7.62 by 39mm or budget 9mm Luger. Geopolitics plays in too. Wars in Ukraine and the Middle East could disrupt supply chains further, though so far it's not sparking panics like 2020. On the flip side, domestic ramps from Federal, Winchester, and Hornady could stabilize things. Their expansions post-2020 are finally catching up, trimming fringe calibers to focus on staples. Black Basin's index at 38 in Q1 hints at lows, but post-April creeps suggest we're in for gradual rises unless demand tanks harder from economic woes. For 7.62 by 39mm specifically, early 2025 saw drops from improved supply, but tariffs reversed that quick by July, per trackers. Same for 223 Remington. Military priorities at Lake City mean civvy prices feel the squeeze. Economy-wise, with debt over $1 trillion and spending dips, shooters are backing off, which might force manufacturers to hold prices or offer deals to move inventory. I've chatted with shop owners. They're pivoting to services, optic mounts, AR builds, NFA help to stay afloat as ammo sales slow. Industries responding. More reloading gear on shelves, digital scales, progressive presses from Dillon, time savers for high-volume guys. Big chains stock less bulk discounts, more tools. It's a cultural shift. We're shooting smarter, not less. If prices plateau, great. If not, our adaptations keep us ready. Hey, fellow gun lovers, if this breakdown fired you up, drop a like and subscribe to Survival Gear Showcase for more no BS gear reviews, tips, and stories that keep you locked and loaded.